Hare Acharya ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Giri Govardhana ki
Jai.
Jai Shri Jai Navadip Dham Bhai Purdam Vrindavan ki
Jai.
Jai Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat ki jai. Jai Bhakti Yoga Sri Chaitanya Saraswati ki jai. Jai Scientific Sankirtan Yogi ki jai. Jai Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Jai Go Prema
Hari Hari Bol.
Jai Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj ki
Jai. Hari Hari Bol.
Jai Shantamalaya Puri Maharaj ki Rasaraja Prabhu Krishna Devi and Krishna Kesava Madhava Nandji ki jai. And Ayodhya Prabhu ki jai. Alright, so we'll have some reading of our verse.
The sound working?
Shri Guru
Sripad Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnava Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagadam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Shahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagamala Vidya Shri Krishna Shara Agyantibirandasya Yananjana Salakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Puja Shri Guru Bhagavadgita Mahabhavamaitachaya Sara Purvarishvara Pachalita Pachalita Bhakti Nirmana Nirasya Nimritam Sarakshakam Saranam Vande Shri Guru Deva Nanchashayam Nirjam Gorvavishta Supurkam Guru Ganera Shisha Sambhushitam Chinta Chinta Samasveda Nipuram Sirupa Pantanam Govinda Vinam Jaram Bharatanam Bhaktavidam Sundaram Mande Vishwagurucha Divya Bhagavad Prema Pranam Devam Divyatanam Suchandavanam Bhavakachevanchitam Sandrananda Puram Sarikavaranam Vairagya Vidam Dhurim Sri Siddhantarim Shubhakti Lasitam Sarasatanam Bharanam Bandetam Subhadam Adhikasaranam Jnanishwaram Shishwaranam Sri Siddhanta Saraswati Gita Gojo Gurvanaye Bhagavanadeva Prabhate Gayane Gaura Sankirtanaye Mayavadati Milodharadhan Tritajaniman Krishna Prema Sudadhiman Sura Prabhara Prabhum Tambaye Namo Gurukisaraya Bhaktavutam Mutaye Gauragniparamaya Radha Bhava Sishthime Vande Bhakti Vinodam Shri Gaura Sakti Swarupakam Bhakti Sastraya Sastrajam Radha Rasa Surahirim Gaura Bhajashraya Shresha Vaishnava Mandir Devigraham Jagannatha Prabhum Bhanje Premadhivya Vaishnavam Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavadevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Vanchitatakam Krishna Bhaktaruva Sarusakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktaya Namami Bhakti Shaktikam Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Seshe Namaha Jaitam Surato Kangur Mamadavati Gati Masravasa Parambujo Radha Mohano Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hari Hari Bo.
Page 105. Amar Jivana Sara Papirata Nahika Punyera Lesha.
Amar Jivana Sara Papirata
Nahika Punyera Lesha.
Parera Udvega Diachi Ekata Diachi Divera Klesha.
Parera Udvega Diachi Ekata Diachi Divera Klesha.
Nija Shukalagi Papena Hidari Dayahina Swarta Para.
Nija Sukhalagi Papena Hidari Dayahina Swarta Para.
Para Sukhe Duki Sada Mitya Basi Para Dukha Sukha Kara.
Para Sukhe Dukhi Sada Mitya Basi Para Dukha Sukha Kara.
Ashesha Kamana Vidhi Madho Hamare Karodi Damba Parayana.
Ashesha Kamana Vidhi Damba Parayana.
Madhamata Sada Vishaye Mohita Hingsa Garva Vibhushana.
Madhamata Sada Vishaye Mohita Hingsa Garva Vibhushana.
Lasya Hatta Sukhaye Virata Akarya Yogi Ami Arkaye Yogi Ami.
Nidyalasya Hatha Sukhaye Virata Akarye Udyogiyami.
Pratisthalagiya Ratya Acharana Lobhata Sarakami.
Pratisthalagiya Sathacharana Lobhata Sarakami.
Ehena Durjana Sanchana Vajita Aparadi Nirantara.
Ehena Durjana Sajjana Varjita Aparadi Nirantara.
Subhakaya Sunya Saranartha Manna Nana Dukhe Jara Jara.
Subhakaya Sunya Saranartha Manna Nana Dukhe Jara Jara.
Varakhe Sastana Upaya Vihina Tate Dina Akinchana.
Bharake Khana Upaya Vihina Tate Dina Akinchana.
O Bhakrati Vinoda Prabhura Charane Kare Dukha Vivedana.
Bhakti Vinoda Prabhura Charane Kare Dukha Vivedana.
Amar Jivana Sara Papirata Ahika Punyera Lesha.
Amar Jivana Sarabha Pirata Nahika Punyera Lesha.
Arero Udega Diyachi Ekata Diyachi Divera Klesha.
Parera Udvega Diachi Eka Bhagavata Jiyachi Jivera Klesha. Jai. Jai.
जय श्रीपाद भक्ति पुरी महाराज की
Jai.
finished holding.
Maharaj, did you want me to show Shanta and Muni Maharaj and Madhava Prabhu the banner that we got?
Jai.
Register people whenever we want.
You can display in the, I called that persons, in the fair, and they told they send me a mail, but not yet replied back. Again, call back. They have some charges to, pay to have a stall there.
But it'd be for the whole weekend, it's 2 days, right?
Yeah.
That's nice.
So shall we ask for charge something?
If they have a charge.
They have a charge.
Yeah, I think it might be worth it.
What are they, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next weekend?
Yeah. Saturday, Sunday, but next weekend we're not coming here. We're joining there then.
Maharaj said it'd be okay for
Go
us
off
to.
one, okay.
Where is it located?
18 Edison.
Yeah. This is only half of the order.
Half, huh?
Half.
Half not came?
Yeah.
Oh.
It came in two separate shipments. So.
Oh. And they not send the other things also, half they sent?
Yeah. Did you see
Yeah, this one. Oh, this one.
this?
Okay.
And then the business cards, the new business
Yes,
cards.
yes.
I'm going to read about
This trifold came with folding?
Lord Ramachandra and the Srimad Bhagavatam.
And this they send it by cutting or?
It
This
was
is
You got it.
Canto 9,
like this.
Chapter 10,
Staples
Text 50.
for 250
Well, read this.
pages. One cut cuts 250 pages for $3. Can you please, if it's okay?
How do you do it? Up here?
Yep.
Right down. Move over to that side, right here. Can you hear me? Hello? Viva! Jai Shri Bhakti Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Shri Sripad Maharaj ki jai. Jai Govinda Maharaj ki jai. Jai Acharya Maharaj ki jai. Jai Santa Maharaj ki jai. Viva! Is that too loud? Is that too loud?
No, that's good, I think.
Is it good?
Yeah.
All right. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 10th chapter, 50th verse on Lord Ram. So, should I turn around? I got all these wires. I know it's going to be electrocuted. rid of this. Just once.
You might want to use a different app.
Okay. All right. Thank you. From Bhagavatam 9th Canto, 10th chapter, 50th verse. It is sometimes said that people want the kingdom of God without God. Such an aspiration, however, is never to be fulfilled. Good government can exist when the leadership between the citizens and the government is like that exemplified by Lord Ramachandra and his citizens. Excuse me. Lord Ramachandra ruled his kingdom exactly as a father takes care of his children. And the citizens, being obliged to the good government of Lord Ramachandra, accepted the Lord as their father. Thus the relationship between the citizens and the government should be exactly like that between father and son. When the sons in the family are well trained, they are obedient to their father and mother. And when the father is well qualified, he takes good care of the children. As indicated by the words Swadharma Nirata, Varnashram Kunan Vita, Brahmana Kshatriya Vaishya. The people were good citizens because they accepted the institution of Varna and Ashram, which arranges society in the Varna divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, and the Ashram divisions of Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. This is actual human civilization. People must be trained according to the different Varnashram occupational duties, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 4.13, Chatra Varnamaya Sristam. The four Varnas must be established according to the varying qualities and work. The first principle for good government is that it must institute a Varnashram system. The purpose of Varnashram is to enable people to become God conscious. Varnashram Charyavatta Purushena Para Puman Vishnur Arajati from the Chaitanya Charitam, Module 858. The entire Varnashram scheme is intended to enable people to become Vaishnavas, Vishnur Asya Devata. When people worship Lord Vishnu as the Supreme Lord, they become Vaishnavas. Thus people should be trained to become Vaishnavas through the system of Varna and Ashram, as they were during the reign of Lord Ramachandra, even when everyone was fully trained to follow the Varnashram principles. Oh boy, again it happened. I touched something down here.
Every time it happens, there's going to be an arrow down here.
Okay.
Can you put it in opposite direction? Timber? On that side.
You look almost like Madonna. She's the one who invented the cheek mic.
Okay.
Thank you. So, millions of years ago, in the age called Treta Yuga, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, descended as a king. Lord Ram, or Ramachandra, his adventures were written down by the poet Valmiki in the 24,000 verses of the Sanskrit scripture Ramayana, and the world's oldest book. It is the world's oldest book. The purpose of Lord Ram's advent is to attract us, conditioned souls, to the timeless transcendental path of Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, and to establish the principles of religion, morality, and righteousness. By reading the Lord's pastimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam or Ramayana, and by hearing of his exceptional prowess, even the unsophisticated soul becomes drawn to the blissful security of genuine spiritual life. Since time immemorial, each of us embodied souls has been revolving through the cycle of rebirth, samsara. To deliver his servants, trapped in the net of Maya illusion, God comes himself or sends his avatar for our salvation from the delusion of material ignorance. Attraction to the lotus feet of the Lord, acceptance of his divine shelter, and the joyful singing of his name opens the door for going back to home, back to Godhead. The story of Lord Ram. Ramachandra appeared in the Sun dynasty as the son of King Dasarath in the time of the King Ikshvaku, the first ruler of earth. Lord Ram was the darling of his father and mother, Queen Kaushalya, as well as the hero of Ayodhya, the capital of what was then a single world kingdom. Ram had all the admirable qualities of leadership, even from earliest birth or youth. He possessed all physical strength, beauty, religious wisdom, fame for prowess with weapons, royal wealth, and complete renunciation. Inseparable from Ram was Lakshman, his younger brother. Together, the two brothers appeared on earth to vanquish the almost invincible atheist King Ravana and his numberless hosts of Rakshasas, who are man-eating warriors. They not only killed their warriors, but they ate them.
They swallow them.
Huh?
They swallow, live.
They sucked them?
Swallow them whole.
Oh, they swallowed them all. Inseparable from Ram was then Ramachandra is described as being of greenish hue. His bodily luster, like fresh green grass. Lakshman is golden hued. So we have black and white. There they had green, gold, and all kinds of people. His first military campaign. Then no one was equal to Ram. While Ram was still a boy of 16, the yogi Vishwamitra approached King Dasarath and asked that Ram be allowed to travel on a military campaign against two Rakshasas who were attacking the heritage of saintly persons, interrupting the performance of sacrifice. After some hesitation by Dasarath, who was loath to have his son part for a dangerous mission, Ramachandra went forth. If we take military history as an evolution of progressively more deadly weapons, we may slight the figure of Ram, possessing no more than a bow and arrow. But the enemies of Ram were allowed no such miscalculation as to his ability to destroy. He stood before them like a hill of nuclear missiles. He discharged his feathered arrows in sheaths which blotted out the blue of the sky and which entered the hearts of the enemy in unlimited numbers at incredible velocity. His bow, a gift from his demigod Indra, was a supreme army and air force in itself. His arsenal included many varieties of deadly Ram, Lord Krishna says in the Gita. God is the greatest warrior, and he possesses the means to release the ultimate weapon. On this boyhood military campaign against these rovers of the night, Ram discharged 2 wind weapons, killing 1 Rakshasa and landing the other a few thousand miles away in the ocean. Sita's wedding. Vishwamitra, being pleased with young Raman and Lakshman, narrated many wonderful things to them about the appearance of the Lord as the dwarf Vamana, about the origin of the sacred river Ganges, and about the worshipful bow kept by King Janaka, the father of Sita. Once, for his part in ameliorating the anger of Lord Shiva, Janaka was presented with a most formidable bow. The bow was so mighty that no one could even bend it in order to string it. Janaka made offerings of flowers and prayers before the bow given him by Lord Shiva, acknowledging that the person who could string the sacred bow must be of extraordinary power. In view of which King Janaka offered the hand of his daughter Sita to the man who would come and bend the bow. Sita, of course, had many suitors, and all failed to win her. Of all chaste and beautiful young women, she was the topmost jewel, and was very dear to Janaka. Vishwamitra brought Ram and Lakshman to Janaka's palace, just to show them the bow given by Shiva. A large assembly of people were gathered to see the weapon, as Ramachandra took it up in his hand and asked Janaka, "What would you have me do with it? Shall I string it now?" "Yes," Janaka assented. At once Ram easily bent the bow. Until it cracked in 2 pieces, making a thundering explosion, which rendered all present unconscious, except for Vishwamitra, Ram and Lakshman. At that time, the gods showered flowers from the sky upon Ramachandra, and there was shouting in the heavens. King Janaka then agreed with great pleasure that his daughter should be married to the mighty Ramachandra. Sita, the wife of Ram, is not considered an ordinary being. It is understood that as the Lord Ramachandra was Vishnu, the Supreme Lord himself, so Sita was actually Lord Lakshman, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, who serves eternally at the side of Vishnu in the spiritual sky. Being the daughter of the royal saint Janaka, she is also sometimes called Janaki. It is stated in Ramayana that Sita came to earth for the destruction of Ravana, who was a vilifier of married women. As Ramachandra was the greatest warrior and expounder of religion and morality, so Sita was the greatest beauty among women, and the most chaste. Valmiki compares the sight of Ram and Sita together to the moon and the brightest star.
Sometime in scientific conferences in India,
yes,
they sometimes narrate, these weapons and some of these planes, and some scientists make fun of this. How can it possible? That technology was there, but now does not exist.
Preparations for Ram's coronation. Growing old, King Dasarath decided to consider the kingdom of his eldest son Ram, to confer the kingdom on his eldest son Ram. On the release of this news, the kingdom of Ayodhya turned to joyful preparation for the coronation of the beloved prince. The Ramayana, Ayodhya Kanda states, the streets were crowded with men. People were going in mobs, and there were constant shouts of joy like the roar of the sea. All the places were filled to their utmost capacities. All the highways were swept and washed. Garlands hung on every gate, and the flags streamed from every house. The whole city was anxiously waiting for the morning of the coronation ceremony. We're reading about Lord Ram.
Yeah, today Ram.
The night before, Janaki and Ramachandra were observing a feast and were given mantras to recite. They worshipped Narayan and lay down on a bed of grass within Vishnu's shrine. The Ramayana goes on to relate faithful events of the king Dasarath's wives, Queen Kaikeyi. Queen Kaikeyi had brought up an orphan girl named Matara, who served Kaikeyi as a maidservant. It was she who sowed the evil seed of the great personal ordeals related in the Ramayana. Amidst universal joy, Mantara had heard the news of Ram's coronation with a feeling of rage. With malicious intent, she entered the room of Queen Kaikeyi and proposed to her that the coronation of Ramachandra was a calamity to the queen. Kaikeyi was the mother of Dasarath's second oldest noble Bharata. Mantara cunningly outlined how Dasarath had recently sent Bharata away on a visit to his uncle in order to install Ramachandra. And after the installation, Ramachandra would surely see that Bharata was killed. With crooked logic, Mantara predicted all the grief ahead for Kaikeyi, and in this way implanted evil wrath into the queen's heart. Queen Kaikeyi was now convinced that Ramachandra must be eliminated. She was very dear to Dasarath, and she was able to strike tellingly by binding him to a promise. Once Dasarath had fallen badly wounded on the battlefield in a clash between Indra and some Asuras, and Queen Kaikeyi had nursed him as he lay unconscious. At that time he had promised her 2 boons, but she had said she would ask for them at a later time. Lying down in a room in her palace called the Chamber of Wrath, Kaikeyi awaited Dasarath, and when he came and found her there, she infected the coronation day like a snake biting a calf by demanding the following 2 boons. Let Ramachandra be banished to the forest for 14 years, and let Bharata be installed as king. Dasarath fell unconscious at her words. He soon regained his senses, understood what she was saying, and again fainted away. Awakening a 3rd time, he cried out in torment. Oh, how sad, how painful. I suffer from your words. Being oath-bound to you, I suffer now, as a man does for misdeeds confirmed in a previous birth, committed in a previous birth. We may think, why didn't Dasarath simply say, no, never, I will not banish Ram. Ram is dearer to me than truth. But he did not say that. He had made a promise, and as a Kshatriya, a warrior, he had to stand by it. His religion was truth. Because he had promoted Kaikeyi he promised Kaikeyi a boon at a time when she had saved his life. Therefore, he was obliged to grant her the promise, whatever it might be. In this case, a fate worse than death. Excuse me. Dasarath was ruined, and the kingdom of Ayodhya with him. Dasarath lamented bitterly and prepared himself to be condemned by his peers and by the future. Still he was bound to the truth of his promise. Ramachandra was called to court by Dasarath. Ram was about 26 years old, and it was his coronation day. He rode in his chariot to answer his father's call. It is said that Ramachandra came out from his palace surrounded with an effulgence of glory, just as the moon emerged from behind the dark blue clouds. Lakshman stood by him with a yak-tail fan. Elephants and horses followed his chariot, and music, shouts, and cheers were continuously heard. As he passed the window of beautiful women, they rained flowers on his head. Some of them praised Kaushalya, the mother of Ramachandra, and others said that Sita was the gem of all women and must have practiced great penances in former births, or she would not have had such a husband as is king to be. Can I get some water? But on entering his father's presence, Ram found the old king looking miserable and distressed, seated on a sofa with his queen Kaikeyi. She personally delivered the cruel message to Ramachandra. Datharaj fainted away in grief of hearing again the wrath of Kaikeyi, but he could not deny it. Thank you. Now this is going to be a trick. Magnanimous Ramachandra, however, was not a bit pleased to hear her shameful words. He only replied, "Very well, I shall go from here," and proceeded to the Dandaka forest for 14 years with an unwavering mind. Ramachandra proceeded to inform all those gaily preparing for his coronation. He was at once leaving for a mendicant's life in the forest. His natural cheerfulness did not leave him, but he was touched to tell his mother, and he thought both parents might die at his separation from them. The fateful news soon spread. It spread to the women in Rama's palace, and they began to cry bitterly. The queens and other royal ladies waited for he who used to serve them and who looked on them as his mothers, and who never grew angry with them, but had sweet words for all, that Ram was going to the forest. When he approached his mother, Kaushalya, she was still informed only of the coronation, and she fell at his feet and offered him a seat and some refreshment. Ramachandra, with clasped hands, said to her, "Mother, you don't know what a great calamity is descending upon you and Janaki and Lakshman. I don't require a seat anymore, for I am now bound for the forest and shall live here for 14 years on fruits and herbs. Father has ordered my exile and Bharata's installation as king." Kaushalya fainted on the ground like a tree felled by an axe. Valmiki describes how, with difficulty, she told Ram that he must fight to win his crown. But Ramachandra told his mother that it was beyond his power to disobey his father's orders, and he could not follow any desire which went beyond righteousness. Ramachandra said to Kaushalya, "Father is our preceptor. Who, having any regard for righteousness, will disobey his orders, even though they may be given out of anger, joy, or lust? I cannot act against my father's vows. This life is not everlasting, so I would not wish to acquire even the world by an unjust means. Lakshman was not consoled. He was brooding and overwhelmed with grief at this turn of events. Lakshman argued that Ramachandra must not submit. He suspected, in fact, that the whole story of promised boons was just planned by the king in order to install Bharata and thus satisfy the lust of his queen Kaikeyi. Lakshmana was prepared to hack to pieces with his sword the king and his whole army. He was ready to bring the whole world under the sway of Ramachandra. Ram replied that he thought the best course for himself was to obey his father's orders. Ram's mother gradually, with great sorrow, offered her blessings and prayed that she would someday see him coming back. Ramachandra then took leave of his mother and went to Janaka's quarters. She also knew nothing of Ramachandra's exile. She was in a state of joyfulness over the installation as king. She was worshipping the deities when he entered with his head hanging down low. On telling Sita of his exile, Ramachandra said that she must stay behind and live under the rule of Bharata. Janaki, who was always always sweet in speech, replied to him with an offended air. How could he say such infamous, unworthy things, especially as he was a hero versed in Vedic science? If you repair to the forest, I shall go in front of you and make smooth the path by crushing all the thorns under my feet. I shall not leave your company, nor will you be able to dissuade me. But Ramachandra, thinking of the factual hardships of forest life, told her about the reality of the situation. Prowling animals, crocodiles in muddy rivers, sometimes no drinking water, no heat, hunger appeased by fruit fallen on the ground, matted locks, bark for clothes, observance of the rules of asceticism. This was the business of forest life. Ramachandra said it was too dangerous, but she entreated him that as a devout wife, she was happy in his happiness and sorry only in his sorrow. With Ram, she assured him she would find the hardships heavenly. Ramachandra finally relented and admitted that he was by no means unable to protect her in the forest, and formerly many royal saints had repaired to the forest with their wives, so he would follow their examples. He advised her to at once give away her beautiful clothes and valuables and to be ready to leave. Lakshman, who had been there while Ramachandra spoke with Sita, caught hold of his brother's feet, as it was unbearable for him to be separated from Ram. Ram tried to dissuade him from joining them. He asked him to stay in the kingdom and keep an eye on the court, but nothing could turn Lakshman. He replied that Bharata would maintain the kingdom, but he must be given leave to join Ramachandra. He would go before Sita and Ramachandra as their guide and would procure the foods, and they could enjoy while he would do everything else required. Whether Ram was asleep or awake, Ram was asleep or awake. Ram was pleased and ordered Lakshman to prepare for departure at once. We're reading something about Ram's life for his festival today is called Ram Navami. Then, unfortunately, the whole kingdom could not join Ramachandra in exile, and the people were sorry. They were sorely distressed. Indeed, they proposed to join him by the thousands, but Kaikeyi would not allow it. If everyone went with him, it would be no exile at all. No, Ramachandra must go with only Sita and Lakshman. But the people lamented that the city would become deserted without him. All religious institutions would be destroyed, and dirt and filth would cover the yards. The rats would roam free. Ramachandra, hearing them carry on, was not moved. Shortly after Ramachandra's departure, his father died of grief. He could not live with Ram in exile, and with his last breath he cried the names of Ram, Lakshman, and Sita. Young Bharata was at once called back from his uncle's house by special messengers, who told him no more than to come at once. Bharata arrived before his mother, Queen Kaikeyi, and learned first that his father was dead, and then that his brother was exiled on the wish of his mother. Bharata was shaken with remorse and called Kaikeyi a murderess. To Bharata there was no question of assuming the throne without Ramachandra and Lakshman. After performing the funeral rites for his father, he set out without delay with an army behind him to bring Ramachandra to bring Ram back, and himself take the place, and have him take the place of the exile. And himself take the place of the exiled in the forest. Only in this way could he hope to remove the stain of his mother's action. So, basically, Bharata wanted to take Ram back and have him installed as the king, rather than sitting in the throne himself.
My favorite part is coming.
I'm sorry?
My favorite part is coming.
His favorite part is coming.
What is it?
Like
Sandals.
Hanuman.
No, the sandals.
Wow.
They're not there.
Isn't here?
Bharata was shaken with remorse and called Kaikeyi a murderess. I said already. Sita and Ram in the forest. Forest life for a royal prince was supposed to be an abominable insult. Ramachandra managed to cheer up Sita by pointing out the beauty of the natural setting. After some time, Bharata and his army arrived in the vicinity. One soldier climbed a tree and saw smoke issuing from a cottage. Bharata and a few others then went forward on foot, and Bharata beheld Ram's cottage. Valmiki described it. He found there the formidable bow plated with gold. The quiver was full of sharp arrows flaming like the sun. There are swords in golden sheaths and gloves spangled with gold. There stood a special altar, and fire was burning at the northeast. Bharata found there lotus-eyed, fire-like, effulgent Ram, seated on a hide with bark and a black deerskin, and with matted locks in his hair. The brothers embraced. Bharata told of Dasarath's death and pleaded for Ramachandra to return and take the kingdom. Ramachandra replied to his younger brother that none of us have an independent existence, just to do as we please. We are subject to death, all of us. Ram told to note how people are pleased to see the seasons change, that they do not realize it means that the duration of life is shortening. And on any walk a person takes, death is within him and walks with him. and rest with him. So in all circumstances, intelligent people subdue grief. He told Bharat to return and take charge because that was the wish of their father. Ramachandra said, "Let me pursue my duties here." Bharat replied that he was only a boy and Ram must rule over him. But Ram was firm in keeping his father's pledge. He cited a Vedic proverb: "He who saves his father from the hell named Put, and who saves his father from all sorts of difficulties is Putra, or a true son." Bharata relented, but took back with him Ramachandra's sandals, promising to dedicate the kingdom to the sandals of Ram and to wait in aesthetic observance for the expiration of the 14-year exile. The war with Ravana. First class with the demon king, Ravana, took place through his sister Shurpanakha. She was a hideous monster who wandered into the cottage of Ram and was struck with lust at seeing the Lord. She delivered somehow insults to Sita, and for that Lakshman cut off her ears and nose. Running back to the camp of Ravana, she howled for revenge, and the death struggle thus commenced. Ravana had almost everything.
She served Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Huh?
That Surpanakha served Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Gambhira, the house of that given, that is actually this Surpanakha. Given that house, Kasi Misra is the Surpanakha.
What?
Surpanakha, this lady, the sister of Ravan, she came as Kasi Misra and given the house Gambhira to Mahaprabhu.
Ravana had almost everything. Through long performance of austere penances, he had gained great power. He had received specific boons from Lord Rama, the topmost demigod, so that he would never be vanquished by any race of demigods or any power or any personality except man. But of course, no mere man could stand against his onslaught. For the sake of warmongering, he had conquered the demigod Kuvera and Indra. He reigned in a vast kingdom called Lanka, present-day Ceylon, and possessed all material opulence. He and his rovers of the night roamed about killing and eating the flesh of solitary hermits engaged in spiritual practices in the forest. Ravana made a career of violating beautiful women wherever he found them, and had a large harem of hundreds who had surrendered to his material effulgence of wealth and strength. Ravana believed himself unvanquishable. He did not care for God. He challenged even the existence of God. He had a plan where he wanted to deport men to the heavenly planets by means of a staircase structure reaching to Indra's paradise, so that the people could go there without qualifying themselves by performing pious works. He challenged anything and everything good and listened to no cautious counsel about the bad reactions which follow sinful activities. Valmiki says that Ravana's mentality was such that he was living for death, and challenging Ram by the abduction of his wife Sita. Ravana surely chose death and raced headlong towards his inevitable meeting with it. There was no fear of sin in Ravana until such time as he would, cut down by a superior power, Until such time as he was cut down by a superior power, he would violate the authority of the Lord as far as possible. Would you like to read?
Maharaj?
Would you like to read?
You read, Maharaj.
I'm getting a little hoarse.
Will it die if I unplug it automatically, or will it have some time?
It might have some time.
I don't need that mic though. I can read like that.
Haribo!
We are late or two? Ravana, for all his highly developed intelligence, Ravana was ignorant of the soul, thinking his one life to be all there is, and death the end of everything. He justified all sorts of heinous acts. This is the ignorance by which the conditioned living entity is covered over, and by which he cannot realize his original situation of sat-cit-ananda, transcendental eternal bliss, and full knowledge in the loving service of the Lord. Learned sages have concluded that as soon as anyone from the tiny ant up to the conqueror Ravana takes the attitude that he is the Lord and the center, then material nature awards him this bodily covering by which he can go on acting in illusion, ignorant of his real dependence on the soul of the soul's God. Under the illusion that he is independent, he then engages in a further struggle to conquer material nature. Ravana's case is extraordinary because, in defiance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he actually did conquer a significant part of the universe, but as we shall see, his victory, like that of all the worldly conquerors of history, was fleeting, and his every step was actually a step on the path towards his ultimate destruction. From Ravana's kingdom, 14,000 Rakshasas, warriors, poured forth to slay Ram and Lakshmana. En route, Ravana's troops experienced a downpour of evil demons. Blood showered upon them with dreadful noise. The horses pulling their chariot suddenly tumbled. Vultures attacked their royal flags. Birds, beasts, and jackals howled. The demigods situated in the sky prayed amongst themselves. May victory attend the cows, brahmanas, and those who are held in high regard by him. Let Ram conquer just like Vishnu with his disc. Valmiki writes that as the planets move towards the sun and the moon, so the fiery Rakshasas army rushed towards Rama and Lakshmana in lust for battle. Rama was informed of their coming, while doom was presaged to the Rakshasas by dark clouds and raining blood. The shafts of Ramachandra were flaming in the war delight, and his gold-plated bow throbbed with ruthless energy. The 14,000 warriors were demolished by Ramachandra alone and on foot. His arrows resembled fire with smoke, covered the whole sky, and he discharged them and fired more with a speed that the enemy could not follow. One man-eater survived and ran back to Ravana with the news that Ramachandra had devoured them with shafts like a five-mouthed serpent. He said that wherever they had fled, they had found Ramachandra stationed before them. Ravana was outraged and reminded the lone survivor that Vishnu himself could not be saved by doing injury to Ravana. But the saviors who had been through the hell of slaughter placed that his Lord Ravana just listened to him with attention regarding Ramchandra's valor, and he had experienced it. He humbly submitted to his chief that Ramchandra could bring down the stars and planets and raise the submerged earth by his arrows, and could destroy all creatures and create them anew. Ramchandra was simply unslayable. The survivor also offered to Ravana that he had seen the beautiful wife of Ram called Sita. He said that no woman could be equal to her in beauty. She was in the bloom of youth and most graceful. Her beauty struck one with such deep wonder. The Rakshasa concluded that if Ravana could somehow enchant Rama into the forest and take her away, it would be the one way to vanquish him, for he surely could not survive separation from his wife. The kidnapping of Sita. To implement the abduction of Sita, Ravana called on his warlord Maricha. The Maricha was the same Rakshasa who had been carried 1,000 miles through the air and thrown into the ocean by the wind arrow of the 16-year-old Ram on his first military expedition. Ravana asked Maricha to take the form of golden deer to frisk the front of Sita. When Sita should wish to have the deer for her own, Rama and Lakshmana could be induced to follow it, and at the time Sita might be carried off. Maricha was filled with alarm on hearing such talk from Ravana. He reported to his chief that the proposal was impossible. For one thing, as Indra is the king of gods, so Ramchandra is the king of all. Nobody should dare to take Sita away, as she was protected by the chastity and devotion. Maricha knew that Ramchandra was deathlike, and he advised Ravana to desist from his thoughts of crossing the Lord. The king of Rakshasas, irritated that his subordinate had even attempted to dissuade him, told Maricha that he must perform this service or be killed. Maricha, in the form of a wonderful deer with silver spots and scene of jewels, appeared before Sita in the forest. His hooves were made of blue stones, and he had a little tail that shone like the rainbow. He walked this way and that, browsing on the creepers and sometimes galloping in so many ways. He drew the mind of Sita, who asked Ramchandra to catch him for her. Lord Ramchandra is, of course, none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. He knows past, present and future. For the sake of establishing the principle of morality, he, accompanied by the goddess of fortune, played the parts of Ram and Sita and let this pastime unfold. Cognizant of Maricha's deception, Ram decided to go after the deer and kill him. Ram firmly ordered Lakshmana to stay behind with Sita. He then pursued the deer. It became elusive and even invisible. Ram shot one deadly shaft which entered Maricha's heart like a flaming snake. His counter fist goes gone. Maricha, in the hideous form of a huge Rakshasa, now rolled upon the ground. With his last breath, he cried out loudly, "Alas, Sita, alas, Lakshmana." Waiting with Lakshmana in their cottage, Sita heard the cries and believed it was Ram, and then he was in some danger. She told Lakshmana to go at once and help him. Lakshmana dismissed the idea that Ramchandra could be in danger. Besides, he knew his duty was to remain and protect Sita. But Sita, in great anxiety over Rama began to speak harsh words. She accused Lakshmana of not going to help Ram out of lust for her. Lakshmana could not bear to hear such unfair words and left to seek out Ramachandra. This was the moment Ravana had been waiting for. He found Sita alone and carried her off by force. On a chariot pulled by donkeys, Ravana of 10 heads and 20 arms flew through the sky with his arm around Sita. Sita was protected from gross sexual violation by her power of chastity. Also, Ravana had at one time in his career received a curse from the yogi, father of a girl he had violated. If Ravana ever attempted to again enjoy women by physical force, his head would split into pieces. By this act of abduction, Ravana completely sealed his doom beyond doubt. Not only would he die for capturing another's wife, but he would not even be able to enjoy her in the meantime, not for a moment. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada nicely explained the relationship between Sita and Ravana. The goddess of fortune is called Chanchala. Chanchala means that she is not steady. Ravana took away Lakshmi, Sitaji, to his place, and instead of being happy by the grace of Lakshmi, his family and his kingdom were vanquished. So, Lakshmi in the house of Ravana is Chanchala or not steady. The Ravana class of man want Lakshmi, but Lakshmi only without her husband, Narayana or Ramachandra. Therefore, they become unsteady by Lakshmi ji, and so materialistic persons find faults on the part of fortune. Of course, in the spiritual sky, Lakshmi is fixed in the service of the Lord, and in spite of her being the goddess of fortune, she cannot be happy without the grace of the Lord. Unable to forcibly have his lust satisfied, Ravana gave Sita a tour of opulent Lanka. He showered her the swans and ponds and his harem. He showered her how thousands of mighty Rakshasas awaited his word. And he described Ramachandra as a weak outcast who would never be able to come to Lanka. He asked Sita to rule over Lanka, and he would become her slave. Though she was weighted down with sorrow and deeply absorbed in anxious thoughts, Sita cheered Ravana by telling him that for this reckless outrage he would be destroyed by Rama and Lakshmana. In the face of his lion-like ferocity, she told him, "How can the consort of a swan who sports with her mate amidst lotus favor with her glance a water crow who is straying amongst weeds and bushes? This body is now useless to me. You may chain it or destroy it. I shall not preserve it anymore, nor will I ever bear the stigma of unchastity. I am the devoted wife of Ram, and he will never be able to touch me." Ravana could only threaten Sita that if after 12 months she did not favorably turn to him, he would cut her into pieces and have his cooks serve her to him for a feast. Alliance with the monkeys. Playing the role of a human distort. Upon losing his beloved wife, Ramachandra was plunged into grief. He appeared crazed and his understanding clouded. He was going through the forest, asked the flowers and trees if they had seen his love. He feared she had been eaten by the Rakshasas. He and Lakshmana searched everywhere. Rama questioned the sun, "Where has my darling gone?" He asked the wind if she were dead or alive or stolen, or had he seen her on any path. Lakshmana attempted to draw of Ramchandra's despair by sensible words, but he was paid no attention. Finally, the brothers found signs of Sita, pieces of clothing torn while resisting Ravana, and ornaments which had fallen from her as she rose up in his chariot. They also found the bloodied, dying body of Jatayu, the ancient king of birds, who had made a valiant attempt to stop Ravana's fight. Frothing in his last blood, Jatayu informed Ramchandra that it was Ravana, the king of the Rakshasas, who had taken Sita. The brothers got further information that they could obtain the help needed to find Ravana's kingdom by making alliance with Sugriva, the king of Vanaras, a monkey race who lived in the southern region of rivers and lakes. Rama and Lakshmana sought out Sugriva, who, as it turns out, shared a similar misfortune. Sugriva's wife had been abducted by his enemy, Bali. A mutual alliance was formed. Rama and Lakshmana helped Sugriva defeat Bali, and Sugriva and his monkey army set out to help Rama and Lakshmana defeat Ravana.
Maharaj,
Yes.
I think we have to stop here. It's now 2:30, and you have to leave at 3? I have some prasad. The Ramayana is 24,000 verses.
Yes.
So this is a brief